Up until the 1960s, all Roman Catholic Masses across the globe were celebrated in Latin, using what was referred to as the Tridentine Rite. But as part of the reforms of the Second Vatican Council, changes in the rite, including the use of the vernacular or native language of any given community, became the norm. After years in which its use was greatly restricted, in July 2007, Pope Benedict lifted these restrictions and allowed for it to be more available. The problem is that there are few remaining who were trained in the Latin Mass or have ever even participated in it. Terry Hegarty tells us now about a group which travels across the country reintroducing the Tridentine Mass. He caught up with them a few months ago during a visit to Our Llady of Czestochowa parish in Turners Falls.
There were sights and sounds in Our Llady of Czestochowa Church in Turners Falls recently that hadn't been seen or heard there in more than 50 years. But they were familiar to many nonetheless. A Tridentine Mass, also called the extraordinary form of the Latin Rite, was celebrated at the traditionally Polish parish. The Tridentine Mass was the traditional form of liturgy prior to the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s. All of the prayers, chants, hymns, and responses were in Latin. The homily was delivered in English.
Without humility, it is impossible to be just before God.
A standing room only crowd of approximately 300 worshipers attended the more than 2-hour liturgy.
Well, it was a historic event because the Solemn High Mass hasn't been celebrated in the Diocese of Springfield since the 60s, the early 60s, and there are people who grew up never knowing this.
Aside from the language, one obvious difference includes the orientation of the celebrant and the altar. In the Latin Rite, the priest stands facing the altar and tabernacle on the back wall. Proponents say this is symbolic of the priest standing with the people, as both congregants and priest face the same way, worshiping as one.
I was very happy for them to have that opportunity because, of course, many of them never have. They're young. It also would help them to appreciate the Novus Ordo, the Mass of Paul VI, and they would be able to see the connection between the two.
Father Robert Fromageau, a member of the priestly fraternity of St. Peter, was the principal celebrant. His fraternity is dedicated to promoting the traditional liturgy.
The extraordinary form appeals to the latest generation, so to speak, because it provides that structure which makes an increasingly chaotic world tolerable.
Father Fromageau traveled to Western Massachusetts from Nebraska and was assisted by seminarians from Our Lady of Guadalupe Seminary in Denton, Nebraska. James Smith, one of the seminarians and a resident of Shelburne Falls, arranged to have the Latin High Mass available to the local faithful.
There's a certain richness in symbolism, in the gestures, that in an artistic way communicate various, let's call them just general truths of the faith. And this too there's a value in doing that. That dedication that they have within themselves, they feel is reflected in a liturgy that is just very rich and somewhat complex.
That complex liturgy has been easier for local parishes to provide since 2007, when Pope Benedict declared that pastors could decide to hold the Latin Rite Mass. For those under the age of 45, this was the first opportunity to celebrate such a liturgy. Father DiMascola says that the pre-Vatican II form of the Mass should add to people's appreciation of the regular liturgy.
It brings a good many parishioners back to their roots, and for younger Catholics, it acquaints them with the roots of what was once a regular and standard part of the observances of the faithful.
Obviously, there are plenty of people who go to the ordinary form who are very dedicated Catholics, by all means. But just as, for various reasons, there are many people who find a certain dedication and find even a certain depth that they can reach through the way that the Old Mass fosters prayer.
Father Fromageau was quick to point out that one form of the liturgy is not better than another.
It's true, though, that if a person goes to the Old Mass, the extraordinary form, and maybe he is convinced that this, for all kinds of reasons, this Mass is better than the ordinary form, he shouldn't say to himself, and therefore I am better than everybody else. What he should say is, I need this better liturgy because I'm weaker than anyone else. Right? I'm a sinner.
Not all of the Latin was foreign to participants. Parishioners regularly do sing and speak some Latin responses as part of the current celebration of the Mass at Our Lady of Czestochowa Parish. Reporting for Reel to Reel, this is Terry Hegarty.
I'm sure that story brought back fond memories for many of our viewers. Father DiMascola says that participating in both forms of the Mass can lead to mutual enrichment, and he hopes to be able to have the Latin Rite available again sometime soon.